Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hey guys, let's get into the next episode here. My name's Connor, if you are new. Hello, I'm from the US. I like to learn about history usually, and with the help of you guys. So let's go. I'd recommend watching the previous episodes. That's up to you. We're in episode 8 now. Preemptive, like, the previous episodes have mainly been about the Soviet and German moves in Central and Eastern Europe. And so we're going into submarine war. Have you ever... I've seen a movie called Das Boot. It's a German movie, and it is fantastic. And so that's what I thought of when I saw the title of the video. Let's get into it. Let's learn.
October 20th, 1939. Many of you know that I've covered the First World War week by week as well as this one. In that war, we saw several tales of swashbuckling daring do on the high seas. Well, guess what? In that respect, this war is no different.
Wonder how effective those World War I submarines were.
I'm Indy Nidell. This is World War II. Last week, the Soviet Union made demands on Finland for territorial concessions, ostensibly to protect their own borders. The Finns said no. Hitler issued a directive stating that he wanted to attack in Western Europe now in 1939, and both sides were debating how best to use Norway and its waters to their own advantage, particularly concerning submarines. And submarines are in the news this week. I mentioned last week the German sub U-47 under Günther Prien had left base at Kiel, navigated through Britain's entire defense net, and surfaced at the end of the week at Scapa Flow, the British naval base, undetected, right? Well, at 1 a.m. on the 14th, Prien's first torpedoes hit the battleship HMS Royal Oak in the bows. Prien reloads and repositions. There is no reaction from shore yet. At 1:23 come 3 more torpedoes, followed immediately by explosions that tear the Royal Oak apart and which finally raise the alarm. 883 crew members are lost. Prien escapes to open sea. 3 days later, he arrives in Wilhelmshaven and is welcomed by Grand Admiral Erich Rhode. Prien and crew fly to Berlin, where Prien is awarded the Ritterkreuz, Knight's Cross, the highest level of the Iron Cross, by Adolf Hitler himself. However, that success aside, this month 4 German U-boats are disabled in the English Channel, and in future they're routed around Britain when traveling to and from home. But there are other navies besides the British and Germans. I mentioned the Polish Navy last week, but not the Polish Submarine Division. This was just 5 ships, and they were mostly used to monitor...
Seems like a really big inconvenience having to go all the way north around the British Isles if you want to get into the Atlantic, because the British are just controlling the English Channel.
German Naval Act. This was just 5 ships, and they were mostly used to monitor German naval activity. Back on September 7th, they had been ordered to the central Baltic, but most had maintenance issues. See, normally, they were docked each May and October for maintenance and repair. But because of the tense international situation, that had not happened this past May. So they've gone nearly a year without being fixed. I read in Poland Betrayed that back on September 14th, in the middle of the German invasion of Poland, the division CO sent this message to his 5 commanders. Carry out patrols and interdict enemy shipping as long as possible. When unable to operate further, break out for United Kingdom. If that is impossible, seek internment in Sweden. When approaching Great Britain, contact Rosyth on 133 kilocycles and rendezvous 30 miles off May Island in the Firth of Forth. Well, 2 of them have been so badly damaged by depth charges and aerial attacks that they opted for Sweden. They were soon joined by a 3rd, so over 200 Polish naval personnel were interned in Sweden. The other 2, the Wilk and Orzeł, made it to Rosyth. The Wilk, despite being under heavy German attacks, reached Rosyth September 20th. The Orzeł, well, that is a wartime epic of an adventure. It patrolled the Baltic for a couple of days until the captain ordered it to head for Tallinn, Estonia, instead of Sweden. He was having stomach pains and was taken to a local hospital there. So Jan Grudzinski, lieutenant commander, took over. Estonia is neutral, so by international law, he had 24 hours to leave port. But since a German freighter was also due to leave, Orzeł's departure was delayed. This was also okay under international law, by the way.
It's an interesting rule. that you're not considered a belligerent power as long as the hostile nation doesn't stay for longer than 24 hours. And I wonder what you would do. Like, would you then attack them to show that you are still neutral if they don't leave after 24 hours?
But the Poles were told that since they had overstayed, they were going to be interned. The breech locks of their ship's guns were removed, as were 15 of their 20 torpedoes.
Well,
and they were relieved of all of their...
Well, that answers my question right away.
Ship's guns were removed, as were 15 of their 20 torpedoes. And they were relieved of all of their navigation charts and small arms. So Grudzinski snuck out and sawed through the hawsers holding them in port to the point where they were basically being held by only threads. The night of September 17th, 2 of his sailors snuck ashore and cut the lead of the big searchlight that illuminated Orzeł, plunging it into darkness. Then the 2 Estonian guards were overpowered, the hawsers quickly severed, and the Orzeł took off. The British Admiralty report of that night reads, "Out into the night and freedom. They were seen and fired on by heavy artillery, which drove them under the water, and presently they heard the propellers of the destroyers and motors in pursuit of them. All night they fled submerged, steering blindly with no chart to give them soundings, and at dawn they lay down on the bottom. During the day, they heard the hunters passing to and fro over them. Depth charges burst around them, some near, some far, till they lost count of the explosions. At midnight, they rose cautiously and had a look around. They judged themselves to be at the entrance to the Gulf of Finland, and there was nothing in sight."
That's interesting. So obviously, you know, the rule 24 hours, and then you have to intern them or you're going to be seen as a belligerent power. But how far are you going to pursue them if they escape and flee? Because clearly you didn't want them to stay, and they escaped on their own will. And so how far, as the neutral power of Estonia, are you willing to pursue them to show others that, you know, you're still neutral and not abiding and are abiding by the rule of 24 hours?
You gotta hand it to the British Admiralty. They got some pretty lyrical writers, you know, guys? Anyhow, Grudzinski decides not to make for Britain, but to continue cruising the Baltic looking for Germans or Russians, since by now the Soviet Union has also invaded Poland. But first, he needs a safe spot where he can remain on the surface and recharge his sub's batteries. It would also be nice if he could find a German merchant ship to board and get some charts and maps, but that does not happen. He does, however, get his batteries recharged. But by this time, the whole thing had become a huge international incident. The USSR accused Estonia of letting them escape, and the German radio accused the Poles of murdering those poor, innocent Estonian guards. Those guards, by the way, were safely aboard the Orzeł until they were dropped off on the well-populated Swedish island of Gotland with money, cigarettes, and whiskey. By September 20th, there were 2 Soviet cruisers and 8 destroyers looking for the Orzeł, but it cruised the Baltics for 2 weeks until finally deciding to head for Scotland.
It's crazy how politics and people in international relations never changes. It's as soon as there's an event that can be seen as like violating something for your purposes, and people who act like you are more like pearl clutching when it benefits you. It's like, only point out things. I guess this is more of just a human reaction to being appalled at bad things that are good if you're appalled again, that benefits you if you're appalled. But if it doesn't benefit you and it hurts you, it's like, don't talk about it.
Only navigational aid was a list of lighthouses, so they used them to travel the Danish coast. They escaped German destroyers in the Sund, but briefly ran aground. They made it to the North Sea, where they came under attack by both the Germans and the British because their wireless equipment had been damaged and they had no way to identify themselves. Finally, they lay on the bottom of the sea off the east coast of Scotland, where they managed to repair their radio enough to transmit a weak signal.
This is like Das Boot.
This week on the 14th, now identified as a friendly vessel, a Royal Navy destroyer escorts them into port.
Wow.
Yet their home nation is now in foreign hands. And those foreign hands
Hell of a story.
need to decide how it is to be governed. Well, territory not formally annexed by Germany or the USSR is put under
Puppet
German
state.
civil administration and called the General Government.
Vichy
It is
Poland.
also announced by
Vichy.
Germany that their army will no longer have administrative control. Hans Frank will run things beginning next month in the General
I don't know what Vichy means. I was saying, like, the puppets government in France. I probably sound stupid there. Sorry.
General Government. It is also announced by Germany that their army will no longer have administrative control. Hans Frank will run things beginning next month in the General Government region. Albert Forster in Danzig and Arthur Greiser in Posen. All three are senior Nazi Party members and are to prevent any sort of Polish leadership and make Poland so poor that Poles will want to work subservient jobs in Germany. Forster and Greiser are furthermore to transform their regions into pure Germanic provinces. On the 22nd, the Germans will begin deporting Poles from Poznan, the largest city in western Poland. But already on the 16th, all Poles are ordered to leave Gdynia, taking only what of their lives they can carry. Also this week on the 19th, the first Jewish ghetto is established in Lublin. And in those conquered Polish lands this week, by decree of the Council of Ministers for the Defense of the Reich under Hermann Goering, SS field divisions, those people mainly responsible for the ongoing campaign of terror and execution, now have judicial independence from the German army. So SS soldiers can no longer be tried by army courts-martial, but only by their own superiors. OKH, Oberkommando des Heeres, the German Army High Command issues Fall Gelb, Plan Yellow, on the 19th. This is the response to Hitler's directive from last week about a new offensive in the West, and will be a holding action on the French border, the main German attack to come through central Belgium, and with some attacks on the Dutch on the right flank. Even at this point, and it's already being debated and modified, nobody seems really happy with it. And to the north, neither the Finns nor the Soviets are happy. They meet again the 14th, and the Finns continue to refuse Soviet demands. This frustrates Joseph Stalin to the point that he warns that an accident might occur between Soviet and Finnish troops if negotiations take too long. But Soviet troops are elsewhere on the move this week. Last month, the USSR signed a pact with Estonia that allows the Soviets to keep thousands of soldiers on Estonian bases. This week, the first of those forces arrived. Stalin has promised in return to respect Estonian independence. And as those soldiers arrive, 12,600 Baltic Germans now leave Estonia heading west. It's not just in Poland that the Germans are resettling. And that is the week. Nautical tales of heroism on both sides.
That was a crazy
Germany
story.
more formally organizing the dehumanization process of the Poles, the Soviets entering Estonia, and the Finns still refusing to be swayed. And the SS now answers only to itself. Well, and to Hitler and Himmler. But a couple weeks ago, Hitler pardoned everyone in Poland who had committed war crimes. So they should be okay there. It's October 20th, 1939. 2 months ago, Poland was an independent nation, and the Soviet Union was negotiating with Britain and France. Now Poland has been overrun, and both the occupying Germans and Soviets are committing barbaric atrocities against the Polish people. The Baltics are coming under Stalin's sway, and Hitler is planning an attack in the West, where hundreds of thousands of Allied soldiers await them. Think of your life, your world, 2 months ago. Has it changed this much since then? Madness.
Okay. So this is what I'm learning. All right. Is that to the Germans, you know, you had the Anschluss, like you took over Austria, which with pretty much no consternation or condemnation. You take over the Sudetenland in like outer Czechoslovakia. Then you take over all of Czechoslovakia. And then you have Poland, where it seems like Poland, although not a match for the Germans, were the one state in Eastern Europe on the eastern flank of Germany that could give any trouble militarily, right? I'm not saying that Poland could have had a big chance of defeating a much more powerful Germany, but that seemed to have been the German thought process that, you know, for the East, Poland, if you don't count the Soviets, obviously, which I'm sure they're thinking about, Poland is that one where, like, you have to just crush it immediately militarily. and then you just consolidate stuff. And that seems to be what they're doing here. And the Soviets are now doing as well. The Soviets have Finland to deal with, obviously. But the Baltic states seem to be some kind of, even compared to Poland, much less powerful. And so they're using some different tactics to kind of bully them. Very interesting. Obviously, that plan that was pointed out there, what the Germans were going to do, was not correct. They ended up going through the Ardennes. Very cool. Love you all. Hope you're all doing well. Would appreciate any answers to any questions I had or any comments at all. And hopefully I'll see you guys next time. We'll keep on learning episode 9. All right? See you guys.